Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. And as a quick catch-up for people that dip in and out of this podcast and just select which episodes they like to listen to, let's answer a few questions from you all. The interview that I recorded with Gary Vaynerchuk in Las Vegas a few weeks ago, the audio corrupted. And I found myself stressing about it, and I'm currently hoping that D-Rock has any footage that I can salvage and use. But after suffering what appeared to be an epileptic-style seizure on the plane ride home, something that I've never had before, which was a little bit scary if I'm honest with you, because it was 1 hour into a 10-hour flight, I've learned not to stress about trivial things like podcast audio files getting corrupt, even if it was my one and only chance to speak with Gary Vaynerchuk. Maybe it just wasn't meant to be, but I did get to spend half an hour with him and had a fantastic conversation. But my big takeaway from it all, of course, is it appears that I'm not invincible after all, which has put a halt to my plans for world domination. But you did not tune into this podcast to hear about my health. This is a tech podcast, and the show must go on, my friends. So today, I want to talk about a company called Concordium, which delivers a public blockchain that replaces anonymity with perfect privacy. And it also augments trust with a protocol-level ID mechanism, meaning that you cannot transact on the network without a verified and approved ID. Now, combined with the use of zero-knowledge proofs, this feature allows its community and its end users to benefit from the security of ID verification and transaction privacy without having to code for it. But most excitingly of all, in a world where blockchain had a reputation for a long time for building projects on future promises, Concordium has met or surpassed every single one of its milestones in its development plan and are executing at a speed which is incredibly uncommon for other players in this space. And that is something to celebrate on its own and certainly opened up my curiosity. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Switzerland so we can speak with Fønss Schrøder, CEO of Concordium. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Fønss Schrøder and I'm the CEO of Concordium.
Fantastic. Now, before talking about Concordium, I think it's always important to learn a little bit more about the problems and the issues that are out there that you're initially trying to solve. So can you tell me a little about those issues at the moment, especially around privacy?
So problem if you really want to have, and which I think the world needs, is industrial scale uptake of the use of blockchain because it's providing so many good things. But the problem today is that you don't know who you're dealing with. The anonymity is a big problem. So I think today it's anonymity on say, the legacy blockchain, but transparency on what you're doing. And you actually need the opposite. Business, they need to be able to identify themselves and know that they are dealing with an identified person, but they need to disclose, say, the business contact and whatever they have. They don't necessarily want to have that in the open. So this is the main problem today of how you are using and the way you can use blockchain.
Now, I read a great story on Forbes recently where I think it was yourself that said that you believe that the global blockchain infrastructure is being held back by anonymity. But for anyone that missed that article in Forbes, can you expand on your main points that you made in that article for everybody listening?
Yeah, and this is also what we are thinking when we say first sort of designing a new blockchain. Is very much built out of the needs and understanding our founder, Lars Seier, had when he was building Saxo Bank, which is a regulated bank trading platform. And my own background also from banks, like I've been the senior advisor for Credit Suisse for years, and I'm the board member in Handelsbanken, which is one of the systemic important banks in Sweden. And I've also been the chairman of Saxo Bank for Lars Seier, but I'm also building fintech, and we're just up running now on Credit Suisse's platform, Nykredit's platform, which is the biggest bank providing property financing in Denmark, and the biggest issuer of covered bonds in the world, actually. So I understand the regulator needs, and I also understand if blockchain is, say, being used large scale, of course it has to be regulated the way you also regulate other things. Companies can't work with a blockchain which kind of defines its own rules. And this is what we are looking at. And the biggest problems on the legacy blockchain today is that you are dealing with non-identified person. The anonymity is a big problem. And identification, KYC, anonymity in the world is actually a huge problem. It's taking a lot of resources, a couple of % on the BNP, that people are uncertain on who they are building business with. And I think Gartner actually are quoted for saying that more business in the world is not taking place because of the problem with identification than business taking place. So identification is a big problem. So that is one of the things you have to solve on blockchain. The other things you have to solve is that it is needed to go from the proof of work to proof of stake, which many new blockchains are doing. And this is, of course, in order not to have the large energy consumption. And then there are other things you need to build into to the protocol in order to make the protocol sufficiently, say, safe, the cybersecurity things, but also to build in mechanisms to ensure that what you are doing is actually, say, right in their calculations. So these are the features we are focusing on when building Concordium. So we also build in thermal verification in our protocol, which is, say, a very complex way to test what you are doing. Just to explain it easily, is amongst others what NASA is doing behind whatever, say, mathematic proofs they build into their software. They verify it by formal verification methods. And this is what we're also doing in cooperation with our own research centers at Aarhus University and at ETH, the technical university in Switzerland.
And Concordium, like you said there, it delivers this blockchain that addresses both the challenges that we've mentioned, but also with perfect privacy that augments trust with a protocol-level ID mechanism, essentially meaning that you cannot transact on the network without a verified and approved ID. So can you tell me more about how, combined with the use of zero-knowledge proofs, this feature allows its community and its end users to benefit from the security of ID verification and transaction privacy, but most importantly, without having to code for it too?
Yeah, so we also think, again, to show the regulators what you are able to do, we don't think it's sufficient that you just say, have this built in on a use case or smart contract level or DApp level. We think if you have the identification already at a protocol level, you just say guarantee that the identification issue is solved already when you start building on the blockchain. So that's one thing, and I actually think this will give a very good dialogue with regulators on what the possibilities are. The other thing with perfect privacy, for example, one use case, we make a couple of use cases or a couple of apps on our own blockchain in order to show how you can use it, but also they could function as accessories for our own users. So one thing is the ID app, and I really love this app. I have teenage daughters myself who often have to show their identification cards. It could be which they're buying used tickets for something. getting student rebate or whatever. And I'm not comfortable that my teenage daughters have then to show their ID card, which gives their social security number, maybe even their address, maybe even their telephone numbers, so that you can have an app where you can easily install it with the help of the zero knowledge proof, just to and then show a QR code, which just is verifying that you have a certain age. Something like this is a marvelous thing, I think, really, really lifting security for our teenagers or for anybody in the society.
And we will have people listening all over the world, in particular businesses and business leaders. And I believe that Concordium is designed from the ground up to handle real-world business needs. So can you expand on this and what you set out to achieve, but also how any business leaders listening will be able to leverage it and maybe offer a few use cases that will help them understand on how it would work in their world?
Yeah, so I think being a business leader myself with many years as a background, both from the C-suite in large corporations, being a CEO myself, and also sitting on the board, chairing Volvo Cars board meetings, and also sitting in the board of companies like IKEA, I really understand what it is you need in a business in order to be able to build a new technology. So first of all, you need to work with people who understand what you're doing. You need to work with people who understand what the needs are. Let's take one example. If you're selling, let's say you want to sell cars on blockchain, then that would give you in your smart contract, which you could have on your website, and people could just buy a car immediately on a blockchain, and they would immediately in our Concordium be identified with the identification mechanism, and then that would sell the car, and that would generate a revenue to Polestar, Volvo, or Geely, and that revenue have, of course, then to go into their IFRS accounting, and then it needs to fit into all the control mechanisms in the company for how you reconcile the revenue, etc. So you need to have an understanding on how does things work, and what is the different mechanisms on the accounting side, on the controls, on the compliance. How does it fit into the whole just making a smart contract? What is the governance which is needed in large corporations in order to do this? So I think when you talk about communities for your blockchain, it's very important, of course, to have communities for coders who actually can code the smart contracts. But it's also very important to have contacts with system integrators, that is the Essentials or the Wyminds of the world, the Capgeminis or whatever of the world. And it's very important to have also the big auditing firms like the Deloittes of the world in your community. So it's very important to have all this and to have the understanding of what is needed when we're building our API layer for the smart contracts. We all have, say, centuries of experience, and we are building some real-time use cases ourselves in order to double test that our API layer and our toolkit is really prepared for large corporations. So these are not just, say, smart words. It's because our soul is in this, and we know what we're doing. We have that hands-on knowledge and experience. We sit with these issues in large corporations every day. So I see one of my most important role is exactly what I'm doing to bridge between our solid, totally experienced blockchain coders, our science people, and then what I call, say, the real world. The world, it goes on governmental sides, public offices, and large corporations in demanding industries like financial industry, banks, and large corporations who really have to put their name behind their product.
And it really stands out as well. Not only that you know exactly what you're doing and you're experts in this field, but also your incredible passion behind this project. Because especially when we compare it with a few years ago, where blockchain startups developed a reputation for building projects on future promises, whereas you guys at Concordium have actually met or surpassed every single milestone in your development plan, and also are executing at speed, which is incredibly uncommon for other players in this space. So I think we need to shout about that a little bit as well. So can you tell me a little bit about how you're exceeding your own expectations at the moment?
Yeah, so I don't think we're exceeding our expectations, but we're fulfilling our expectations. And I think it's because the way we have been putting the group together and the way we understand, say, the holistic understanding of what is needed is, of course, making you, enabling you to structure things and having the right questions up front. So in your planning, you know what you're going to address. Then certain things takes time, like formal verification is a very cumbersome process. It does take time. So it's also important to allow the expert to work. And I think the way we are putting in good solid thoughts on how you are, making science and the way you make governance for science, how you start with defining actually what are the conditions, under which conditions do we want to work. It could be like, what kind of variation factors do we allow? So you start, putting up the good solid scientific discussion on within which parameters are you going to work. Because then people know what they're doing. They are more able to define what is needed in terms of, if we stay with the formal verification, the mathematic calculations, the way you have to address this. And then when you have people who again have many, many years of experience, I think that is important that you allow them to chip in, that you have workshops, because often I see the problem is when people don't know what they don't know. I think it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. That is that a lot of problems actually appear from that people don't know what they don't know, or that people who really know what they know, they don't understand what other people don't know. And I think if you have this in mind in whatever you're doing, and put a group together where you really are able to address and have people to ask the questions the others didn't know had to be asked. But in order to do that, you need people with solid experience. And with all due respect for young coders, which we also need to have in, and we really have to need to have groundbreaking, cutting edge, thinkers. But we also need to have a lot of people who have experience. And I think this is actually, it has in many of the blockchains you see out there today, it's very much, the first group of people, but not the second. And this is probably why you haven't today something, I don't see that in the market. I don't see that you have any blockchain today which are fulfilling these criteria. And this is probably why the uptick hasn't been bigger. Because for us, it's not to be anarchist. It's not to make something which could, live under the radar scheme of national states and international bodies, etc. That's not for us. This is not what we're doing. This is not our ambition. Our ambition is to take a part of this, because there's so many good things in the sort of decentralization. And I also think that the world does need organized alternatives to the very centralization which is going on in particular, on cloud CPU storage and the people you can business interact with, etc. So I think that's very, very good thought. But again, in order to make that ready for the organized world we're living in, and we want to address, We need to build it together with other things. Like I said, that whole, say, understanding of what you need in a toolbox, but also in dialogue partners for your smart contracts. And that is what we are combining.
You have an incredible team in place too. I mean, I recently read that the former 3-time serving Prime Minister of Denmark joined the Concordium Advisory Board, along with an ex-NATO chief as well. I mean, how did that come about, and what are they bringing to Concordium too?
Yeah, so our advisors, and we are constantly expanding our group of advisors. And again, it's because, as I said, we need dialogue partners. We need people who really understand these matters, like Anders Fogh Rasmussen and his group of people. What they are working on now is to look at how we can use blockchain for elections. Now, we all had the European election yesterday, and I think entire Europe was waiting until 11 o'clock to see the results, and I was watching both Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish news this morning to see how things are. And there, if everything was done, if these elections were done on blockchain, first of all, you would know there were no cheating. There would be no cheating. I'm not saying that there are, but all countries now in Europe are doing things the way they have planned for it to do. And it's very expensive to get a vote. I've seen various calculations. So just one, I think, for getting a vote in the US, it's $26. You can calculate it a lot of ways, but it shouldn't be expensive to do a vote. We have, for example, in Denmark, I'm Danish of nationality. Now we had the votation yesterday for EU, and then in 1 week's time we have a general election for the parliament. And just that has been split in two was a big debate, because it's like 2 times up on the cost of carrying an election. You have in many countries, you have really the problem on delays in some. I think we had that during the last election for president in the US. You had the delay in the calculations or the sending of some votes, which really say was a big problem. You often have that suddenly some states or some communities. I think you had in the last Swedish parliamentary election, they were calculating or they were forgetting some votes, and then they had to redo it, and that is then, say, disturbing the whole results, etc., etc. So this is one thing Anders Fogh Rasmussen and his group, and with his solid international reputation, is putting his name behind, that we can do e-voting on blockchain voting as one example of what you can use blockchain for, and so forth. We have various capacities who know the specifics of their industries, and who also can put their name behind, because I think we have to lift this to a level where people understand the quality of what we're doing. And that's also putting high demands on ourselves, because you can't get people to put their name behind. I can speak for myself at least. I don't want to put my name behind something I really don't understand, and where I can't get, say, the proof from looking at things from many angles to understand, yes, this is very solid, this has the right quality, etc., etc. So our advisors are very dear to us, and also in particular in the dialogue we're able to have with the advisors, who then keep, say, very close to us and very updated on what we're doing, back to that, because we might not know the questions we have to address and the questions we should be asking, and then they can be asking those questions. So we really like challenge. And this is the next phase of Concordium, is that we have the luxury that we are funded as we should be in order to get the product to the market. We have the Concordium Foundation behind us. But we want to have some of the leading investors in order, again, to challenge us already at a point in time now where we're able to do that kind of quality verification of what we're doing.
And one of the big challenges, of course, as well, with any technology or any new solution is securing adoption. So I've got to ask, what's next for Concordium? Is there anything else you can share about the road ahead and getting that adoption?
Yeah, so what is next is that we will, in the autumn, we will launch some mock-ups so people can start, playing a little around with Concordium and test and try and have a feel for it. The beta version I'm looking very much forward to, which is coming by the end of the year, because then you can really start, the smart contracts and the apps we're preparing for now can then, tested in real life in beta versions. And then, of course, we're looking forward to listing the GTU, our coin, in the beginning of the next year, and then launching the first version for real users. So what we're doing now is that we are in contact with certain industries. We are building a couple of use cases. So we're not an application provider as such, but I want to have a couple of use cases so we can test and try. This is both in order to show it, and we'll be very vocal about these use cases once they get going, to show the market what can be done to inspire other people to make use cases on blockchain, on Concordium. And the other thing is we will come with this global identification app, which I'm looking so much forward to, because I think this is exactly a product everybody in the world needs. And then we will also come with a wallet, so we'll be able to support and transfer of money via our blockchain. So this is what everybody can look forward to.
And for anybody else listening that wants to just find out more information and follow your progress, can you just remind everyone listening of where they can find out more information and even contact a member of your team if they've got any additional questions?
Yes, so everybody are very welcome to contact us, and you'll find our contact details at www.concordium.com. Reach out. Our CTO, Matthäus, is very eager to take any dialogue on the technical side. We have Jesper Fønss, who is a professor at our Concordium Blockchain Research Center at Aarhus, who would love any scientific dialogues. We have a lot of good YouTubes where our science professors and PhDs, and they have that on Concordium Institute's website. You can find the address also on our own website, and you can look at YouTube where we have a lot of these uploaded.
Fantastic. Well, I'll add all those links to the show notes and the blog post that accompanies this podcast episode. I know you're at a busy airport at the moment. You've still took the time to come and speak with me, so I really appreciate it. So have a fantastic flight, and more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And anybody who wants to discuss and be, a member of Concordium or an investor in Concordium, please contact me, Fønss Schrøder, LFS@concordium.com.
Concordium is designed from the ground up to handle real-world business needs. And it introduces a protocol-level identity mechanism, a regulatory compliant token, and a state-of-the-art decentralized app tool layer. And the idea behind the Concordium network is to create what will become an automated global forum for transaction logging. Essentially, a resource for any user, any company, business, or public sector agency can tap into in order to run smart contracts and other services, leading considerable efficiency gains and cost savings, and ultimately creating network growth by rewarding participants for enabling the network's operation. And it does feel like an incredibly exciting concept and indeed project to me. But I'm sure everybody listening has much deeper insights, expertise and opinions that you could share not only with me, but also with the listeners to this podcast in 165 countries. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Visit my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, where you can check out every single interview that we've ever recorded on this podcast as we race up to the 1,000 marker. So I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast as much as I have, but doctor's orders is for me to take it easy. So I'm off to take my dog for a relaxing walk in the great outdoors and listen to other people's podcasts. So if you have one, again, let me know, and you could be the soundtrack to my life in this symbiotic relationship that we've built together. But that's it from me. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.